Excellent. Can you kindly take a seat? If you wish to take a seat, it's now. And here you go. Can I start by asking you to make sure now, I'll just get a little note for our speakers. The minute you start to do this, to try and address the other side of the room, we're going to get a bit lost. So maybe position yourselves here and you will be able to address everybody at the same level. Can I ask you please to check that your phones are on silent? And here's a quick read of the room. For whom is this their last event before summer? Oh, blimey, you've still got quite a few to go. Who's got a few more events in July to attend? Ah, okay. All right then. Okay, dear audience, dear speakers. Ooh. I wish you all a very good afternoon. And of course, a very warm welcome to this event, presenting the priorities of the Hungarian Presidency of the Council of the EU with a special focus on the dossiers treating financial regulation. My name is Katrina Sickle. I'm beeping, it's not me, and I shall be your moderator for the next 75 minutes. Now, I have the privilege of moderating many events for some very diverse sectors, and I think I can safely say that the title of this one leaves you in no doubt what we are here to lend our collective ears to. So no excuse if you're in the wrong place. I think the title is very clear. Now, this is a joint event. It's a joint event of the European Savings and Retail Banking Group. You all know the acronym, ESBG, and OTP. Now, OTP is a very long-standing Hungarian member, and it's also, as I understand, the largest banking group in Hungary. And together they and we welcome Mr. Gábor Szürcs, who is the Deputy Secretary of State, the Ministry of Finance in Hungary, and his presentation is one we will hear momentarily. Now, we will also hear from the OTP Group, and we are delighted to be joined by its Chief Financial and Strategic Officer, Mr. Laszlo Bencsik. Now, just momentarily, before I invite our very first speaker to the stage, who is the Managing Director of the WSBI and ESBG, Mr. Peter Simon, let me just confirm for you, so you understand the format of the event. We will be taking a few questions from you, the audience, okay? Now, since the pre-summer event season is shortly coming to a close, and I'm imagining your brains are fairly robustly cooked by a lot of content, okay, across the last months, this event is deliberately nice and dynamic and concise, all right? Because at the end, you will get to network over a glass of something cold and alcoholic if it's your thing, all right? So we'll have about 15-20 minutes for a Q&A. Here's two important things. Can I please ask you to keep it brief? I know we're in the Brussels bubble. 3 or 4 sentences. A question has a question mark at the end. That's my first request, all right? My second is very, very simple. Financial topics. So we're here to focus on financial topics. That is the scope of our event. So kindly formulate your questions or comments within that domain. And I ask you, and thank you very much for respecting those 2 golden rules. Now, I think you've seen I'm pretty bossy. I've done my thing for now, and it's my pleasure to ask you to give a very warm welcome to the Managing Director of WSBI and ESBG, Mr. Peter Simon. Warm welcome to you.
It's not that I want to hide myself behind this, don't worry. Thank you very much, Karina. Good afternoon to all of you. A warm welcome at our home of responsible bankers. Responsible bankers, yes, because all of our members of the World Savings and Retail Banking Institute and its European arm, the European Savings and Retail Banking Group, are not merely financial institutions. We are agents of change and catalysts for progress towards an inclusive and sustainable future. Our members' commitment to social responsibility extends beyond banking services. It is about actively participation in the positive transformation of lives and economies. I extend my heartfelt thanks to our distinguished guests and all participants who have joined us today for this special occasion. And when I look around, I know how many chairs we have. We have more than 100 participants here. It's fantastic, and we are very happy that you found your way here. Whether coming from the European Union's, the permanent representations, to supervisory authorities, the ministries, and from the business community, we very much appreciate that you have all taken the time to come and join us here tonight at our premises for this special occasion. On behalf of our esteemed guests, I would like to welcome especially our chair of the Single Resolution Board, Mr. Dominique Labouret, for having the time to join our event tonight. It's a true pleasure and honor to have you here, Dominique. Thank you that you're with us. Today we have a wonderful opportunity to hear firsthand about the financial sector relevant priorities of the Hungarian presidency already on their second day. The organization of such an event certainly could not have happened without the great support and the great engagement of our long-standing member OTP Bank, the largest banking group of Hungary. I would therefore like to express my sincere gratitude to OTP and particularly to its chairman and CEO, Dr. Sandor Czani, for making this event possible, and I'm equally thankful and pleased to welcome Mr. Laszlo Bencsik, the Chief Strategic and Financial Officer at OTP and also member of our ESBG Board of Directors. He will be one of our panelists this afternoon. I'm also very delighted to introduce, thank and welcome Gabor Szöcs, Deputy Secretary of State in the Ministry of Finance, responsible for macroeconomic and European affairs, who has come here today to provide us with an insightful overview of the Hungarian presidency program. We really thank you for making the way from Budapest here to giving us this presentation, and we are thankful for the presidency itself to make this possible here in our premises. As you all know, the Hungarian presidency aligns with the beginning of the new legislative term, a time filled with anticipation as we eagerly await the formation of the new European institutions. We look forward with great expectation to the constitution of the new European Parliament, the election of the President of the European Commission, the appointment of the designated commissioners, as well as the selection of the President of the Council and the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs. Additionally, we cannot overlook other significant decisions awaiting us in the coming month, particularly across the Atlantic with the US political elections. In short, let's welcome the start of the Hungarian presidency by expressing our best wishes for successful endeavors in an ever-evolving European and global context. Europe and the world are undergoing, as we all know, profound changes and facing exceptionally serious crises. Rapid technological advancements, climate change, profound inequalities, demographic dynamics, and current armed conflicts in our direct neighborhood constantly challenge the European Union. However, we continue to find in the Union the foundations for the welfare and for the improvement of European citizens. WSBI and ESBG are and have always been proud to be the voice for the savings and retail banks, which greatly contributes to the harmonious development of local communities and societies. Our savings and retail banks serve 1.7 billion clients worldwide. In continental Europe, only ESBG represents savings and retail banks from 30 countries. Looking ahead, I must highlight that this October, our Global Savings and Retail Banking Institute, the WSBI, will celebrate its 100th anniversary, marking it as the oldest global banking association, established by banks who themselves had been often founded by NGOs to make financial services available for everyone. This significant milestone allows us to reflect on the crucial role played by saving banks over the past century through profound economic, technological, geopolitical, social and environmental transformations. Our long-standing committed member and co-host tonight, OTP Bank, stands as a shining example on how our member banks have shaped our society and local communities by providing credits and services to businesses and families, leaving nobody behind, serving the communities we work for. Before we get started now to deep dive in the priorities of the Hungarian presidency related to the financial sector, please allow me once again to express our sincere appreciation and gratitude to OTP Bank, to all our numerous participants tonight, and especially to you, esteemed Deputy Secretary of State Gabor Szöcs, and the Hungarian Presidency for choosing our venue to unveil your program tonight. So without further ado, in the name of the whole WSBI and ESBG community, let me wish you all an inspiring evening and a fruitful and successful presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Okay, so the gentleman who I'm going to invite next has been name-checked multiple times already, but I did have a chat with him just before this event. So this is a role, our Minister, this is a role where he is primarily responsible for macroeconomic and European affairs, and it's a role that he's been in since September 2023. But a reminder that Mr. Gabor Szöcs is also a member of the EU and the OECD Economic Policy Committees, and chairman of the Hungarian National Contact Point of the OECD. So multiple hats. You've got quite a lot on. A very warm welcome to you. Please join me on stage. Thank you. Now, I'm going to, very importantly, this is counterintuitive. It's that one.
Down.
Down, and you can point it there or there, whichever you prefer, but it's down. There you go. Okay. Floor is yours.
Dear Mr. Simon, dear ESGB members, dear Mr. Benchik, dear representatives of various permanent representation of member states, dear colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation, for the opportunity to be here and to be able to brief you on the priorities and the main goals of the Hungarian presidency already on the second day of our presidency. Actually, this is the first day when I see our logo in live. I think it's quite nice. In the next briefly 20-25 minutes, I will try to go through all the main priorities of our presidency. Hopefully, some of them or all of them will be interesting for you and definitely relates to your everyday work. Also, I'm working for the ministry since September last year. I have spent nearly 20 years in the banking sector. I used to work for the Austrian Raiffeisen Group, for Korea Development Bank, and I spent 10 years for the Hungarian Export-Import Bank. I also worked for the Hungarian Banking Association, and I used to participate on, unfortunately not ESBG, but EBF meetings in Brussels for 2 years. Representing SMEs and also participated in the Export Credit Working Group. So I do believe, and I can say by any doubt, that more or less I know the everyday challenges and the everyday work you are facing when working for your clients. As I already mentioned, yesterday Hungary took over the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU in an increasingly volatile and unpredictable global environment. In addition, and I think we have to highlight it, we take over the presidency during the institutional transition period. This means that we may count with less legislative type of work in the next couple of months, but probably it gives us an opportunity and it's a chance to have more time for policy debates. And I think it's an opportunity for Hungary and for all the member states to spend a little more time with some interesting topics to be discussed. The Hungarian presidency will try to be as flexible as possible to react to the rapidly changing circumstances. We do hope that we will not face with issues like the COVID or another war that will give us some more difficult times. As an honest broker, we are also committed to ensure a smooth transition to the next legislative cycle. And we also trust that building on the results of the Spanish and Belgian presidencies, we can achieve the common goals of our trio partners. The European competitiveness will definitely the key theme during our priority. We believe that the EU has been losing competitiveness to global competitors for decades already. and this process has accelerated in the last couple of years. It is safe to say that while the US became number one in innovation, the EU, being extremely overregulated, became number one in policy making. To paraphrase a colleague of mine, in light of competitiveness, the EU is like an aeroplane wrapped with concrete. It's strong, but it just cannot take off. And it would be nice if EU could take off, and we want to work on this. I would like to bring you or give you an example I find in the French newspaper Le Monde in one of the September issues. In 2008, the GDP of the Eurozone was 14.2 trillion US dollars. The same number in the US was 14.8 trillion dollars, so it's just a very minor difference. By 2023, in the Eurozone, instead of 14.2 trillion US dollars, the GDP became 15 trillion US dollars, while in the US, 26.9 trillion US dollars. So within 15 years, there became a huge gap, an 80% gap between US and the Eurozone. There's a Brussels-based think tank, the European Center for International Political Economy. They published a ranking of GDP per capita of US states and EU countries. Quite interesting. Italy is just ahead of Mississippi, the poorest of the US states, and France is between Idaho and Arkansas, respectively being 48th and 49th in the US. And I think this is just probably one of the reasons why we intend to devote particular attention to reinforcing the EU's global competitiveness. And we believe that the recently published Letter report and the Draghi report, expected to be published in July, may serve as a good basis for further discussion. We do hope that this report will be published soon, hopefully really in July, because that would definitely give a nice background for future discussions. We believe that we need to find appropriate European responses to long-term challenges. The Hungarian presidency, therefore, will put a strong emphasis on creating a framework to boost European competitiveness, in particular productivity, in order to narrow the growth and innovation gap between EU and its global competitors. The adoption of the documents launching the 2025 European semester, including the annual Sustainable Growth Report, which sets out the key messages for EU economic policy by the ECOFIN Council, will provide an opportunity to identify key economic policy messages and initiatives to address Europe's competitiveness challenges. Such challenges could be, for example, the energy dependence, the 3 to 5 times higher gas prices in Europe than in the US, or even the future of artificial intelligence. In addition, the continuation on the debate on the Capital Market Union is of particular importance for improving EU's competitiveness. In this context, Hungary would also like to initiate policy debates on demographic change to address demographic issues and challenges that are reshaping our economies and societies. We would like to initiate policy debates on issues like the aging population, the low fertility rates all over Europe, the long-term sustainability of social security and pension system, the labor market shortages in many of our member states, or exploiting labor reserves, recalling parents with young children back to the labor work, regarding the depopulating of the countryside in some of the member states, or childcare and elderly care. Demographic change is a top priority for us, as it puts at risk the EU's long-term economic prosperity due to shrinking working age population and labor shortages. These trends that are of increasing importance for the EU's competitiveness due to the aging society, the double transition, the depopulation of rural areas, and the changing world of work. The decline in the active population also has an impact on consumption, investment, and economic dynamism, so it's certainly a common European challenge. In this slide, our objective is for the EU to recognize demography as a pillar of sustainable growth and competitiveness, and as a priority for the next multi-annual financial framework, and to allocate adequate resources to this end. The Hungarian presidency will also contribute to the reflection on the future of cohesion policy after 2027. 25% of the EU population still lives in areas, the development of which is under 75% of the EU average. The depopulating countryside needs help and financial resources. We need reforms, new solutions, also linked with or at least taking into account the EU's future enlargement. A midterm review of the cohesion programs should be carried out during our presidency. The political messages on the assessment of the progress of cohesion programs will be decisive in the negotiations on the future of cohesion policy and its role in the EU budget in the multi-annual financial framework, which are expected to start in spring 2025 along the lines of the European Commission's legislative proposal. In the field of enlargement, the Council activities follow a set timetable, which essentially anticipates the program of each presidency, including the Hungarian presidency. Based on the current state of the accession negotiation processes, there is no prospect of any negotiating country concluding on acceding to the EU under the Hungarian presidency. However, Hungary will try to do its best to take the EU enlargement process forward, following a merit-based approach, whilst also keeping in mind the EU's capacity to absorb new members. We intend to further develop policy dialogue with the Western Balkan countries and identifying areas where agreement or quick solutions could be made. Unfortunately, the Russian-Ukrainian war is likely to remain the dominant theme in the EU's work in the coming 6 months. And the situation in the Middle East is also likely to be major focus of attention. This highlighted the need for the EU to assume greater responsibility for its security and to strengthen cooperation on defense policy based on its strategic interest, reinforcing its resilience and its capacity to act independently. An important element of this could be to strengthen the European defense industrial and technological base, including defense innovation, and to enhance defense procurement cooperation between member states. And the question arises that how will we finance this? A little bit later, I will touch upon the new economic governance framework and the new rules. But I would like to highlight that while in many of the member states there's a need for fiscal consolidation, there is another need to increase our defense spending, to increase spending on green transition, and there is an always increasing welfare spending. Within the framework of the new EGR, it will be quite tough and quite difficult to reach all of the goals. So we need to strengthen the role of the banks, financial institutions who can finance this, the role of the EIB, other financial institutions, the role of private equity, private funds should be mobilized. But all these questions leads to CMU and banking union related questions. As another priority, we would also like to step up against illegal migration and to strengthen the external borders of the EU. Last but not least, as another priority, implementing a farmer-friendly agricultural policy will also be in the forefront of our agenda, focusing our efforts to create competitive, crisis-resistant, sustainable and knowledge-based European food system all over the EU. With a view to the post-2027 Common Agricultural Policy, we would like to ensure a reasonable balance with regard to the strategic objectives of the European Green Agreement, stabilizing agricultural markets and ensuring an adequate standard of living for the agricultural population. The main focus in this respect would be on food security, competitive, crisis-resistant and sustainable food system. Review of the administrative burdens of existing green policies is also in the forefront of the agenda of the Hungarian presidency. In addition to addressing the productivity, demographic and structural challenges to sustainable growth, it's essential to implement an economic governance framework that ensures credible and graduate debt reduction through a simpler and more enforceable set of rules, fostering ownership by member states and focusing on medium-term planning, creating the financial room for maneuver to implement reforms and investments that supports the EU's common objectives. The Hungarian presidency will try to do its utmost to ensure that the implementation of the new economic governance reform package, including the new framework for the preventive and corrective arm of the Stability and Growth Pact, and minimum requirements for national fiscal framework, starts with these principles in mind. We are also ready to promote the smooth transition to the new economic governance framework, even amid the challenge posed by the EU-level institutional transition. Our endeavor is to focus on facilitating and, if possible, accelerating the discussion on the operation of the new fiscal rules, with special regard to the clarification of procedural and technical questions. In the budgetary field, the Hungarian presidency will be responsible for the preparation of the 2025 EU budget. My colleagues already started working on it earlier this year on the basis of the Commission's proposal in cooperation with the European Parliament and for taking the necessary decisions for the smooth implementation of the 2024 budget. On the new own resources, we will continue the work started under the previous presidencies. The economic governance of the EU, in other words, the coordination of economic policies of member states along common interest, constitutes a complex system. In the last 30 years, since the entry into force of the Maastricht Treaty, regulation continued to become increasingly extensive. After assessing the lesson and the success of the amended system, the European Commission proposed the review of the framework. The process was concluded under the Belgian presidency, and the new economic governance framework has entered into force on the 30th of April earlier this year. The reform package affected 3 legal acts, the new preventive arm regulation and the amendment of the corrective arm regulation and the directive on requirements for budgetary framework for the member states. Within the new framework, preferably by 20th of September, but by 15th of October the latest, each member state should present a medium-term fiscal structural plan that sets out its financial commitments, as well as priority public investments and reforms that together ensure sustained and gradual debt reduction and sustainable and inclusive growth while avoiding a procyclical fiscal policy. The medium-term plan should discuss the economic and fiscal strategy, revenue and/or expenditure measures, structural reforms that will be implemented to ensure the plan commitments are delivered. The plan should also ensure compliance with the requirements for the debt sustainability and deficit resilience. Taking into account the challenges stemming from the COVID crisis, the requirements to comply with the EU fiscal rules were temporarily lifted between 2020 and 2023, meaning that the Commission did not launch excessive deficit procedures. As the so-called general escape clause was deactivated at the end of last year, the opening of an EDP became possible. The deficit and the debt benchmarks of 3% and 60% of the GDP remained unchanged, and although the rules of the deficit-based EDP have not changed either, the reform has abolished the previous 1/20th rule regarding the debt-based EDP. Instead, in the case of debt being between 60% and 90% of GDP, a minimum of 0.5% debt reduction is required annually, and in the case a debt of a member state is over 90%, a minimum of 1% debt reduction is required. The various challenges and of the current turbulent global economic environment are placing increased burdens on households and businesses. It's therefore essential to improve the competitiveness of European businesses and to consolidate member states' fiscal revenues, which has also led to an increased focus on taxation, to adapt to the challenge and opportunities of the digital economy, and to better tackle tax avoidance and aggressive tax planning structures. Our objective during our presidency is to effectively advance the discussion on taxation files and international issues currently on the agenda, achieving progress which responds to the needs posed by the new business models, international corporations, and fiscal revenues. The high priority areas, for example, is fighting against tax evasions, ensuring legal certainty for taxpayers, and supporting the international engagement of the EU. In the area of taxation, we see an opportunity to enhance the competitiveness of European businesses through digitalization, the efficient use of information, and simplification. In line with the EU's legislative direction in the direct tax area, the Hungarian presidency will continue the work on the dossiers relevant for the future of corporate taxation, the so-called BEFIT package, and is scheduled to start negotiations on the proposal for an information exchange to assist the implementation of the minimum tax, the so-called DAC 9. In addition, Hungary will support the EU's common position and its role in the development of the new tax framework convention negotiated in the UN framework. In the area of indirect taxation, by taking into account the long-term environmental objectives and specificities of different member states, the Hungarian presidency will continue to negotiate the proposal for the new energy tax directive, which is part of the Fit for 55 package, with a view to exploring a compromise on outstanding issues. On legislative issues, the reform of the customs union will be the main topic during the presidency. Hungary will contribute to the EU customs reform, including the revision of the Union Customs Code to make it future-proof and more beneficial to member states and the EU as a whole. Our aim is, on one hand, to introduce several simplifications facilitating customs procedures, to set up a common EU customs data hub, and to create a new EU customs authority that would help member states focus their inspection capacities on the most important areas. The reform package also addresses the challenge faced in e-commerce. According to the member states, and we fully agree with it, quality is more important than speed. Our priority is to continue this substantive debate to ensure that the emerging customs union is future-proof and capable of addressing the challenges of the coming decades more quickly and efficiently. The first reading of the draft is currently being debated, and it will be up to the Hungarian presidency to finalize it and prepare a compromise draft. Some elements of the proposal would enter into force in 2028, but the legislation would be complete only in 2038. And probably the slide that is more interesting for you and for most of the participants. It is our common interest to ensure that financial rules provide a clear response to the challenges of our times, and that we continue to guarantee financial stability. That is why we aim to advance the ongoing negotiations. Building on the work of the previous presidencies, we will continue the negotiations on all 7 ongoing legislative packages, and we are ready to contribute to the discussion on the future of the Capital Market Union in line with the guidelines of the European Council. In this regard, the Hungarian presidency is committed to work on increasing access to finance for small and medium enterprises and reducing the administrative burden on businesses. In the area of banking union, the focus is on the review of the crisis management and deposit insurance framework, the CMDI, with the aim of improving the efficiency of bank resolution. The review includes a comprehensive set of measures designed to strengthen the existing EU crisis management framework and in particular to improve the resolution process for small and medium-sized banks. It also constitutes an immediate step towards the further completion of the banking union as agreed by the Eurogroup in June 2022. The legislative package promoting private investments, the retail investment strategy, is a remaining high priority file from the last CMU action plan. The retail investment package aims to support retail investors who wish to invest on the EU's capital markets by better protecting their investments and providing them with clearer information about investment products and ensuring more transparency and disclosure. The retail investment package aims to offer retail investors the same level of information, treatment, and protection regardless of which investment products, marketing, and distribution channels they use. To this end, the package aims to modernize and simplify investor protection rules so that they are coherent across the different sectors and EU laws. In mid-June, the Council has established its negotiation mandate, the so-called general approach, on both the CMDI and the RIS file. On this basis, the Hungarian presidency can initiate the negotiations with the European Parliament, which we expect to start in autumn, presumably in October. The Council is discussing a number of legislative packages reflecting the challenges and opportunities of digitalization. In this area, the package on the payment service review, PSD2, and access to financial data, FIDA, are of particular importance for us as well. The Hungarian presidency will seek to achieve a Council negotiation mandate on these files as well. We would also like to achieve substantial progress in the digital euro legislative package. And we will seek to start negotiations with the European Parliament on the regulations amending reporting requirement and benchmark regulation. We will have 2 major informal meetings we are planning in Budapest. I think the Eurofi meeting is quite familiar for most of you. It will be held between 11th and 13th of September, and the informal meeting of the ECOFIN Council will be held immediately after on the 13th and 14th of September. During the Eurofi meeting, experts, we expect 800-900 participants to be there in Budapest, are set to discuss, among other topics, ranging from pension gap through digital finance policy to Central European region growth and financing challenges in the current macroeconomic and geopolitical context, of which the latter panel discussion I will happen to be chairing. The agenda of the informal ECOFIN meeting is not yet finalized, but we foresee 2 working sessions for the minister and central bank governors who are also participating. On Friday afternoon, the ministers and the central bank governors together would discuss the issue of sustainable financing on green transition. The Secretary General of the OECD, Mr. Matthias Kormann, and the CEO of the Hungarian Debt Agency would provide presentation on how to bridge financial gap with innovative instruments, how to better mobilize households and other private savings when there is a need to enhance green transition and put public debt on a downward trajectory simultaneously. The Saturday morning session will be devoted to the effects of demographic changes on public debt sustainability, where delegations will discuss debt sustainability risk in the context of aging societies and possible lines of action on the basis of the contribution of the Brussels-based think tank Bruegel. The topic of the ministerial working lunch will only be decided a little later to allow us some flexibility if some specific issues linked to the current economic financial events may need to be added in the last minute. And with this, I would like to thank you again the opportunity to be here and brief you on our plans, on our priorities. I do hope that Hungary will have a successful presidency, and we will put a lot of interesting ideas on the table member states may elaborate on. I also hope that in 6 months from now, when our presidency will be taken over by Poland, there will be already well progressed concrete solutions Poland and future presidencies may deal with. Thank you very much, and I will be sitting there a little later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quite a lot then. Are you going to sleep in the next 6 months? Hopefully, a little bit. Anyway, it's not my job to ask questions. It'll be your privilege to ask questions in a wee while. Can I please again kindly remind you that questions should focus on financial dossiers, and to please keep them to 3 or 4 sentences so that we can hear from as many voices as possible. So many things to unpack there in any case. I mean, we could take a whole week just to talk about the link between the demographic challenges and the EU economic health. I mean, so many things to talk about. Very interesting, thank you. So we do have another speaker, as I said. He is the Chief Financial and Strategic Officer at OTP. So very, very warm welcome to you, Laszlo Pinchik. Thank you. Downwards.
That's downwards, forwards. Yes. Okay. That's
Can you hear at the back still?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, this is as close as possible.
Oh, he's a rock star, look at that.
Yeah, I'm going to sing, right? Hungarian dance. Okay, so good afternoon. It's a great honor to be here and to host this event together with the European Saving and Retail Banking Group. So I thought we introduce you to OTP Group a little bit. We are somewhat more than the largest Hungarian bank. You probably don't know much about us, but I hope this is going to be a somewhat interesting story and certainly unique, I think, in the European context. And in the second part of my presentation, I like to reflect on what Mr. Search, our Deputy State Secretary, put on the first slide of his presentation, first bullet point, reinforcing EU's global competitiveness and how the banking sector or the financial sector can relate to this or contributes to this or can potentially contribute to this. So, a few words about OTP. We are still a small bank compared to the large European banks. So total assets, 103 billion euro. That's like the big banks are 15, 25 times bigger than we are. But last year we were one of the most profitable ones, if not the most profitable, with 27% return on equity. And the nominal profit after tax was 2.6 billion euro, which is again smaller than the large European banks, but if you just look at Central Eastern Europe, and when I talk about Central Eastern Europe, I will talk about the region somewhere east of Germany and Austria, north of Greece, and west of Belarus, Ukraine, and in the north is the Baltic Sea. So that's our turf, right? That's our kind of region where we mostly operate. And if you look at profits in this region, in these countries, then it's only UniCredit which is bigger than us in terms of nominal profits. So we are present in 12 countries, and actually we are the biggest in 5 of them in terms of loan volumes. So besides Hungary, it's also Bulgaria, Slovenia, Serbia, and Montenegro, where we are the largest bank by loan volumes. By assets, we are only number 2 in Bulgaria, Slovenia, and Serbia. Roughly 80% of our operations are within the EU, and more than 40% is Eurozone or quasi-Eurozone if you count Bulgaria here, they are in ERM2. And the reason we are in this wonderful organization is that we are retail bank oriented. So as you can see, roughly 60% of our business is retail oriented and 40% corporate. And by the way, we do kind of basic commercial banking, so deposits, loans. We don't do much fancy investment banking or more complicated structures. So we are really serving the core real economy in terms of our retail and corporate clients. We are also an independent Central Eastern European banking group. If you look at our ownership structure, we have the Hungarian oil company where we have a cross kind of shareholding swap. And we have Group AMA, the French insurance company, with whom we have a 20-year strategic partnership agreement when we cross-sell each other's products. So they have somewhat bigger shares, 9 and 5% in our shareholding. But the rest is dominated by the big global institutional investors. So, I mean, currently, the top 5 is kind of BlackRock, UBS, GIC, Vanguard, and the likes. So how did we get here? And I think it's an interesting story. Originally, OTP was set up as in 1949 as the retail bank of the communist Hungary state, right? So OTP used to be the saving bank in a one-tier banking system in Hungary. And then when the privatization phase started in the 90s, early 2000s in Eastern Europe, it was the only bank which was not sold to a strategic investor. All the other Central Eastern European banks were sold to one of the largest Western European banks, except OTP, which was IPO'd. So the IPO was in 95, and that IPO created this investor structure, this shareholder structure, which is dominated primarily by global investors. Since the IPO, we have not raised capital. So OTP is one of the few financial services organizations or banks in Europe who has never issued capital since the IPO and who has never ever received any state support. So we went through the global financial crisis with exposures in Russia, Ukraine, Ukrainian dollar mortgages, Swiss franc mortgages in Hungary, Romania, Croatia, you name it. So a lot of concentrated risk, put it this way. But we managed to get through without any support, and we actually came out as one of the winners, I would say, from that major disruption to financial services. Altogether, during the last 20 years, we have done 25 acquisitions in 13 countries. And and we are the only really banking group which is actually headquartered in Central and Eastern Europe. So still the headquarter is in Hungary, but as I showed on the previous slide, Hungary is only 30% of the total group at the moment. So ESG, I was reminded to focus on this one. But it's not just for the show. I think, I mean, the last 5 years we have been, I think we internalized, especially the climate and green initiatives, and we want to tackle this through a kind of positive approach. So we actually put or kind of set targets for green lending in a way that we actually try to facilitate this process, the climate adjustment, the adjustment of the economies and our clients. So in kind of 3 years, we want to increase our green loan volumes by 5 times. Sorry, working. Okay. Our commitment to financial inclusion and health is strong. I mean, it's coming from our past, I think, as a saving association in Hungary and having really all the retail clients. Still today, we have retail client relationship with close to 50% of the population. So that creates a kind of responsibility on our side. And 30 years ago we started, or OTP, I joined 21 years ago, so that was like 30 years ago. And they set up this wonderful foundation which is helping kids, really high school and primary school kids to learn more about more about finance and banking. And it's extremely popular. We have 35,000 participants each year in actually 4 countries, so it's getting kind of cross-border as well. We have a bunch of rewards, and most importantly, we tend to do well on the EBA stress test. So last year, the very recent EBA stress test, OTP group was number 4 in terms of resilience to stress scenarios. So that's measured by the decrease of the capital ratios the level of decrease of the capital ratios in stress scenarios. Some learning. Now, first of all, in these small countries in Central Eastern Europe, we learned that size matters. These countries are too small, and that's probably true for other smaller countries across Europe, to really provide a big enough financial sector to sustain many large institutions. So in these small countries, there's a lot of synergy and potential from consolidation and from scale economies. This might not be true for big countries in Europe. I'm sure in Germany or France, even as I guess the German bigger town would have the same size of economy than like some of our countries where we operate. So it might not be true for across Europe, but certainly it's true in the part of the world where we operate. The other interesting factor it is in order to have success in retail banking or commercial banking, you need a long-term horizon, a long-term view. And for that you need a management team which is standing for a longer time. Our chairman CEO has been with the bank for 31 years. And he's the longest standing chairman CEO in Europe, actually. And this is his story, his baby, right? We have gone through various big crises, the 97, 98 Asian crisis, which had strong ramifications for Eastern Europe and Russia, and then the big financial crisis, and then for us, actually, the war started in 2014, when we had to write off the whole businesses what we had in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine when the proxy war kind of started and when Crimea was taken over. And then the pandemics and then the recent war. So all this, and in general, if you look at in other industries and successful organization in other industries, you tend to have characters which dominate those companies for quite a lot of time. And timing matters, but that's more like obvious. Okay, so that was a brief introduction about OTP, and you may remember this name in the future. I hope it will come up more in the European context, and I hope this curve, which is kind of curving upward in terms of our growth and profitability, that will continue to do so. Now the other topic, which is potentially more controversial, competitiveness, global competitiveness of the EU versus the rest of the world. And I think here primarily we talk about the US and Asia. I'm the CFO of the group, and I do all the investor relations stuff. So I actually travel a lot and talk to people and talk to investors and talk to fellow bankers outside Europe, typically in the US. I don't claim that I talk to the top 3 banks, but maybe the top 20 banks in the US, senior bankers. When you talk to them, they talk about growth, profits, innovation, clients, and especially profits and growth and the impact on their stock option plans. When you talk when you talk with bankers in Europe, I mean, there are different topics, right? It's regulatory compliance, how to meet the new Basel IV capital requirements. If it's particularly in Hungary or in some of the Eastern European countries, then it's about bank tax. Unfortunately, Hungary has been the most aggressive and the most innovative in terms of taxing the banks. So this here, banks are forced to do the state jobs. I mean, primarily I think about collecting taxes. So there's a different, I mean, this is anecdotal evidence, but there is a different tone in European banking and in the US banking. The Asian banking is more diverse and less transparent, but clearly if you kind of compare the mindset and what people are engaged with and passionate about, it's very different in the US and in Europe. In the US, it's more kind of how to make more business and more money. In Europe, it's hard to how to manage better and with less cost regulatory requirements and operational risk here. Okay, thank you. There's one thing we all agree typically, and that's the fintech and big tech arbitrage. This is a big problem for North American banks, more from the big tech angle, and also for European banks. So at least there's this anecdotal evidence. I mean, there's no anecdotal evidence for increasing capital requirements, so that's a fact, right? So we know if you look at studies, I mean, the same amount of whatever exposure requires typically less capital in the US than in Europe. And on top of that, in the US, there's an incredibly large differentiation between different levels of banks in terms of how they are regulated, supervised, and what requirements they need to fulfill. Obviously, it can get into really nasty situations like it did a year ago with the Silicon Valley Bank, but it's just different, right? I don't know which one is better or worse, and really I shouldn't make a judgment here, and I don't. There are certain ramifications for both approaches. So let's see how we do in Europe. and obviously these are kind of obvious statements, but unfortunately we know that Europe is lagging behind innovation, and that's just the number of companies in the top 100 IT kind of big tech companies globally, and the number of unicorns in the top 100 unicorn globally. And Europe here includes the UK, so we're kind of kind to the numbers here, because some of these are actually in the UK. I don't immediately have the numbers kind of 20, 25 years ago, but it was really different then. I mean, just think back where, I mean, in the early 2000s, I mean, the type of European companies, at least, I mean, Nokia, I don't know, Ericsson, and then Siemens, whatever, they were really kind of highly ranked, other than the car production capacities of Europe. And then the growth difference that Mr. Serge referred to, it is clear, and again we were kind because we looked only at the last 10 years, but even in the last 10 years you can clearly observe this growth difference, right? So the US is growing faster in terms of GDP than Europe, and Asia is growing so much faster. Now that's a problem in itself, but the real problem is that this difference is actually getting bigger and bigger. And apparently the US recovered quite fast from the COVID problem, and they obviously the war in Ukraine and the subsequent energy crisis in Europe, if anything, that was positive for the US, right? So this is a big difference. So the actual environment for Europe got much worse or much more difficult, and this shows in the numbers. So how did the financial sector do? Again, if you look at the last 10 years, the US loan volumes grew 67%, cumulative 10 years. In Europe, it was 24%. And the structure of these two markets are different, right? In the US, they're much more, the corporates rely much more on bonds and bonds issuance. So this is just, if we included that, then the difference would have been even bigger. Now, if you kind of run the theoretical exercise, if the Eurozone banking sector had grown as fast as the US, then it would have been, then the loan volumes would have been like 4 trillion higher. Now, if you apply a kind of GDP multiplier, maybe 20%, which is again conservative, then we got to 6% higher GDP in the Eurozone, which is like more than 800 billion euro difference in 10 years. And again, the problem is that if you look back this 10 years, in the first 5 years we were okay, but then the last 5 years this difference started to grow and grow. At the same time, European banking sector profitability was much lower than the US, roughly half of that. So what's going on here? To be honest, I don't know. But for sure it's not pricing, because the rate environment has been lower in Europe, right? The base rate has been lower, and the margins, per product margins in Europe tend to be lower than in the US. So actually nominally loans have been cheaper in the US than in Europe. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe it's related to the approach to risk, right? It seems that a higher profitability US banking sector is growing faster and probably takes more risk, right? There's some anecdotal evidence for that, and then some evidence in the numbers. To be honest, I don't know which one is better. And that's typically a strategic policy choice, right? Because taking more risk is risky. So you can get into very difficult situation as the world got 15 years ago. But on the other hand, if we want Europe to be globally competitive, then we need a financial sector which can support that competitiveness and which can grow in order to support that growth, which is then needed for the whole Eurozone economy and European economy to catch up with the US and with Asia. So that was my brief or not brief, I don't know, talk. Thank you for your attention.
Perfect. You can. Here, I'll go here. Kindly, yes. I'm not Laszlo. There you go. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Mr. Benji, could you just answer me before, just in case, and there may well be more questions for our Deputy Secretary of State. Literally, in 2 sentences, I'm just curious, especially as you were told to put the slide in, as it was very good, on green lending. That sea change, is it customer driven or is it the group driven? Literally 3 sentences.
Both.
Both.
Does this work?
If you push the button on, that's the mistake I made in not doing that. And then, as I said,
There we go.
questions from the floor.
That's yeah, both.
Yeah,
Both. I think. I mean, there's a growing industry in Europe, right, around green and green industries, and it's a lucrative business, and they need lending, and typically there are various state-sponsored programs which make it possible for us to give them even better conditions. And of course, we have these internal targets. So this is a very specific goal we want to achieve, and then we have internal KPIs and everything. So we create internal motivation, but it is also coming from our clients to a great extent. Yes.
thank you. Don't forget, you do get food and drink at the end of this. I know you've been in huge listening mode.
If you behave, yeah.
I just let me ask Deputy Secretary of State, any comments, just because you've been in listening mode, is there anything you wanted to add, first of all, before we take questions from the floor, or ask or comment upon in that presentation, or pick up on?
For the OTP presentation?
Yeah, just because you've been listening so much. Listening mode, as the EU institutions always say. Yes.
No, I mean, the presentation was quite interesting, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I was also part of the sector 1 year ago, so I think I know the problems and fully agree with all the slides.
Okay, so you did your job then, Laszlo, Mr. Benji. Does anybody have a question? Yes, okay, so we have 2 questions here. Shall we take, because it's so rare, I'm going to take the lady in the room first, if I may, and then we have questions. Now, up to you. Do you want to hear sort of 2 at once, so you can have a time to formulate, or 1? I don't mind. Moderators do this differently. Well, let's just hear that first question. Obviously, kindly say who you are and keep it beautifully short, because you are what stands between everyone and alcohol. There you go. No pressure. Okay.
Thank you very much. Catherine Carlson from Politico. My question's for the Deputy Secretary of State. Just curious to know your expectations for the discussion around frozen assets during the next 6 months.
Okay, should we hear the next one?
Yep.
That's quite, yeah, just, was it gentleman here? And then we'll hold that thought. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a question more for Laszlo, although I'm interested in Gabriel's views as well. OTB Bank was branded by Ukraine as a sponsor of the war for its exposure in Russia. I wondered sort of how you felt about that and what you are doing about it.
Let's take a third question, because they're so diverse, and that's, I leave it to you. Yep.
Hello, Olaf Jones from Insurance Europe. I think my question is about the retail investment strategy, which we see very much connected also to the Capital Markets Union project. And we see the Capital Market Union project really one of the key focuses should be about encouraging and directing greater private investment into Europe so that we can meet the huge investment needs. And the retail investment strategy can be a great opportunity to simplify, to make it simpler for citizens to invest. However, we see that the Council proposals would make risk more complicated, adding new tests and more bureaucracy, and making the investment journey longer. How will you make sure that risk delivers on the intended goal of risk, but also CMU, and does not discourage consumers from investing?
Okay, a long 4 sentences, but very to the point. So should we start with that one and go backwards? Are you happy to start with that one?
Yep.
Okay, over to you.
We also believe, and I also believe personally, that there's some simplification needed in the EU, and I have been discussing this with various clients, Hungarian and foreign clients, in the last couple of months, and we all agreed that now there's a big push for Hungarian, for European entities to invest outside of the EU. And what we would like to achieve, and what would be good to achieve, is that these European investments would stay in Europe, and in this respect, RIS is very important. I do not believe that within our 6-month presidency we will achieve a lot of successes, but what we will try to do is that just keep this item on the agenda and try to come up with some solutions that definitely leads to more simpler rules. And I think we should just avoid of examples that you were mentioning, that if a private individual would like to invest somewhere, then probably he needs 2 or 3 advisors to fill in the questionnaires and answer all the questions. So I think simplification would be a key. And my personal opinion is that probably there are some low-hanging fruits that we could deal with, and probably some strict and more simple solutions towards a simpler simplification would definitely help.
Should we just take the first? Should we leave the microphone with you and just come back to this issue of frozen assets, which was the first question that came out?
Yeah, in this respect, my answer is that as an honest broker during our presidency, we will definitely act on behalf of all the member states, and if the member states wish to discuss this issue, then we will just keep it on the agenda.
To you, sir.
Yes.
Should be on. Is it up, the little button?
Just a
It's up, yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Thank you. Yeah. It is difficult from 2 perspectives. One was on the group level, given our long-term commitment to Ukraine. We entered the market in 2006, and since then we have supported the country despite quite big losses. We suffered after 2008 and in 14 and 15. But even more importantly, it was really negatively received emotionally by our colleagues in Ukraine who fought heroically, especially during the early months of the war, where we kept, or they kept, branches open in cities which were under siege or air raids, and they just, so it was really heroic, I think, for quite some period of time in 2022 to actually maintain the payments and cash and everything in Ukraine. And I think our colleagues, I'm convinced that our colleagues did an amazing job, heroic job to do that. Now the good thing is that actually OTP was taken off that list in October last year, and since then we are not there. And as much as I can tell, we have a very good relationship with the government. We are doing lending, we are supporting their initiatives. We are actually quite motivated to grow in Ukraine, even going through. Oops.
They didn't want to hear you anymore. They cut you out. So well, I should have done in the presidential debate recently, but they didn't. Go on then. I think, yeah, do you want to?
That's working.
There you
I'm consuming Mike's so yeah, it was difficult, but I think they understood. I mean, we communicated a lot with the relevant authority who kind of administered that list, and we made clear our situations, and we have what we have done and what we have not done, and they understood, and then they changed the so they taken us off from that list.
Anyone else? You need to cast your mind back to our first speaker's presentation. Is there anything else in that in terms of legislative packages that they're going to be working on? Any particular focus that was pulled out?
The drinks, it seems.
That seems to be the drinks.
Or the match.
Or the match, yeah. Are we good? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to ask you nothing else from you two gentlemen, to anything else that you would wish to share?
I will be staying here.
There's a mic for you.
No, I will be staying here. Hopefully most of you can stay so we can have a chat after. But thank you very much again for the opportunity to be here, and I do hope that really in 6 months' time and opening the Battle of Champagne on the 31st of December, we will all believe that it was a successful presidency for Hungary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can't quite get your hands on something cold because I'm going to invite back, not quite yet, just give me a moment, Peter Simon, but just to say, I think that we do have a slide with a QR code. So if you want to comment on the event, maybe you could put that up. There we go. So if you have found it fruitful, the content, the format, then please do click on the QR code. That would be great. So I'm going to leave the stage shortly to give way to Peter. So can I just myself, as the moderator, thank you very much for your time. Can I also thank those of you in the team here, both at ESBG predominantly and also those at OTP Group for hosting this, for your hard work to bring it together. And of course, huge thanks to you for listening, because listening these days, it's a dying art. So thank you very much for doing that. And I'm going to hand back to you, if I may. I think you have some closing words, and we will ask these gentlemen to please stay on the stage. Thank you.
However, it's an honor to reflect on the outcomes of this remarkable event. First of all, thanking Katarina for moderating us in such an amazing way, to Gabor Zöcs from the Hungarian presidency and Laszlo Bencsik from OTP from their contribution. We hope that the Hungarian presidency will be remembered for fostering the peace, security and prosperity of a truly strong Europe, as mentioned in the Hungarian presidency program. The emphasis on enhancing European competitiveness in the world is crucial, and I wholeheartedly support the proposal for a new European competitiveness deal, because it's essential that our efforts to modernize will leave Europe at the forefront of global competition, or better said, bring it back to this. We at ESBG appreciate the proposal to prioritize the implementation of rules rather than the development of new ones. Before embarking on additional legislative initiatives for the 2024 to 2029 term, for us it is essential to assess the impact of recent revisions and ensure their intended effects are realized. A regulatory pause will be beneficial not only to our membership, but for the stability and for the competitiveness of the entire financial sector, and as a consequence, for the entire European economy. The Hungarian presidency is expected to begin negotiations on several critical legislative reforms already mentioned, including the retail investment strategy and the review of the crisis management framework. And it will also seek to finalize the payment services regulation and financial data access regulation, and continue on the digital euro during working parties. These points are pivotal from the saving bank's perspective, and we hope that the coming month ahead under the Hungarian presidency will be a good opportunity to further consider proportionality aspects and to recognize the diversity of the banking sector in the resolution landscape. Regarding specific proposals for the next legislative terms, inspired by the current high-level reflections at the Eurogroup and at ECOFIN level, we believe that new policies must undergo meticulous scrutiny to evaluate their impact not only in terms of retail investors' attractiveness, but also in terms of disruptions, costs, burdens, and competitiveness for the European financial players. Let me now conclude by attracting your attention for a short moment to the ESBG manifesto, which we are glad to disclose and present today in the occasion of this event. It is a good tradition to highlight our values and priorities at the start of a new legislative term, and a copy of the ESBG manifesto has been provided to all participants. It's included in the bag you got. In this manifesto, ESBG has identified 4 key priorities that we encourage policymakers to keep in mind throughout the upcoming legislative terms. Our priority number 1 is simplifying the EU legislation through proportionality and to promote competitiveness. The second point important for us is empowering banks as vital financiers of the EU economy. And number 3, facilitating the green and sustainable transition. And last but not least, our 4th priority is promoting the savings bank's responsible approach in the day-to-day banking activity. For each priority, you can find some targeted proposals which I invite you all to explore in our manifesto. So thank you once again for being with us here. I wish you a pleasant continuation of the evening and invite you all to our reception outside to make a special welcome toast for a good course of the Hungarian presidency and the start of the next legislative term. So enjoy now Hungarian delicious canapés, excellent Hungarian wines, and hopefully enlightening conversations in a truly European spirit. The buffet is open. Enjoy. Thank you.
Mi ismertünk, ugye?
Reméljük.